want to say anything mean. And we're raised, this current generation is raised in that sort of Oprah, Dr. Phil atmosphere of everybody's special. And you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And they deserve to be heard and loved. And so what we're doing is we are robbing the theater community by letting audiences Twitter the reviews. Because I don't think we're allowing ourselves to challenge the artists to be better. That's one of the reasons why I review is I hold theater to a higher level, however you want to call that. It's if we can somehow contextualize who the critics are, like Rotten Tomatoes does this, who the main critics are that you can trust. We've talked about Rotten Tomatoes for film, and then you've got the lesser blogging critics, and then you've got the regular audience that could come in and give their opinions. But I feel that this will push out, ultimately, the critics as we know it as we are, who look contextualized.
You don't think there's room for all of those things?
I'm not sure that the younger generation really cares about history that much. And in order to be this kind of critic, theater history, American history, it all fits in to our style of reviewing. And so if that's not contextualized, I have a feeling that it will push out this kind of criticism.
Stephen, you sound like...
This, what I'm about to say is entirely speculative and probably nonsense. That's my...
Disclaimer.
There's a disclaimer, but I kind of remember when being in college and the same arguments were being said that the young generation doesn't care about history. And that something happens when you get older and you start caring about history all of a sudden. It suddenly takes on a significance that it never had when you were young. So I think as audiences age and as the demographic ages, you may see. I think you're writing the obituary prematurely for those reasons. I could be wrong.
I'm taking into consideration the wildfire of the internet, which was never part of the conversation before.
But those internet audiences are going to grow old. They are.
I think they
hard to believe it.
As we speak.
As we speak. But these are audiences that they're weaned on spell check, the typos. A lot of newer reviewers come along that I can't believe they can't even really write well.
I understand, but there's something about when you look at playwrights. Just to take that as you look at playwrights who are 30 years and under, and they're writing predominantly about coming of age. You look at playwrights 50 and older, and they're writing predominantly about pending mortality, because that's what's on the minds. So as the internet age ages, that concern is going to kick in, and that might give credence to the kind of criticism. That's a speculative theory. That's all it is. But I'll stick to it because, I'm going to shoot myself right now if I don't believe that.
But I mean, along those lines, so how do you nurture that next generation of savvy theater critics?
Why do you nurture anyone else? Was anyone here nurtured, or we just drove ourselves to this?
I think it was a combination of both.
I don't.
No.
Nobody nurtured me. Nobody said, go you forth and write.
You had no mentors or anyone that you aspired
I
towards?
had people I admired, and that's it. It's
Yeah,
my
exactly.
going to them. It's not them reaching out and going, here, kid, come here, write something.
Okay, well, let me rephrase the question then. What if a young kid comes to you and says, help me? I want to do theater.
Kid, forget it. Get out of here.
Charlotte, did you have something you wanted to add?
A couple of months ago, I went to there's something called I won't be able to remember the entire acronym. It's like the Kennedy Center College Theater Festival Critics Conference. It's like you'll fall asleep by the time you get to the end of that. There's someone is spending money to train theater critics, and then they go to the O'Neill. There's sort of one pick from every region, and then they take one of those people and they go to the O'Neill Festival every summer. And I'm stunned by that, actually. And I said the same thing. I was like, why would you want to do this? But you find out that critic doesn't. They have that wonderful thing of youth of, well, they don't know if they want to be a playwright or director, but they just want to think about theater. like some of these bars, it doesn't matter, like they'll just go on to do something. Like I'm just happy that they're curious, you know, even with all their misspellings and their lack of context. I was like that. I mean, I thought I knew everything at 22, and then, you know, life gets more interesting. So I don't know. Maybe we just let it
The
come in,
the
right?
misspellings and typos in press releases are a lot more problematic
Of
for me.
course.
Blogging with- Which is another criterion for going or not going, by the way.
No, that's true.
Bare minimum. Don, did you have something?
Well, you mentioned the O'Neill. The great Dan Sullivan, who used to be the critic at the LA Times, runs a critics training program every summer at the O'Neill. And recently, the ranks of that program have been filled mostly by online critics, and they get a pretty I was at that program decades ago, and they get a pretty rigorous training. They review a show every night, and they have to turn it in by a certain hour. And I would encourage any young critics to go to such a place.
Why don't we create one here?
We don't have an O'Neill.
We have.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say this because recently, you know, everybody's going for a grant. And I thought, what's wrong with a grant if we can actually pay writers and also train the next generation of writers? Because the one thing that I think the 500-pound elephant in the room here, or however heavy they are,
Pink, actually.
is payment. A lot of us don't get paid anymore. I don't get paid to review, and there's a few others here. And that is because we are on blog. And the print that have gone on blog still pay. But even those have reduced the rates that they pay. So my fear for me especially is, oh my gosh, am I gonna burn out here? And what am I gonna be training these people? So I actually called Sasha Annawalt at USC and said, we'd love to take some critics from your criticism program and give them some stage and cinema experience. Come to some shows, and the 5 students that contacted me said, how much do you pay? Well, we don't pay. This is going to be part of your training. They all turned to STEM.
Now, hang on. Those are mid-career journalists.
Those are the ones who are in her criticism program that wanted to cut their teeth.
Oh, you mean at USC? Or
Right,
at
right. The students at USC.
Gotcha,
Students,
gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha.
Right. So that's another thing is, for this kind of criticism, is there really going to be employment opportunities in the future?
Yes,
I
Harvey?
think making no money keeps us honest.
That certainly helps.
If we could just get parking paid for it. That's all I ask.
You know, Olya mentioned to me, who runs Artworks, that they pay critics in Russian. And everybody says, well, there's the fine line of, you know, you're going to give them a good review because you got paid, but that is a possibility in the future of America. That wouldn't it be better for a PR person to have a really good critic come in versus, you know, someone who just wants to see the best in LA theater? I almost said the name. It's going to come up eventually.
Wait a minute. You're saying that they get the theaters pay the critics?
Yep.
And it's actually, it's about 2 sides of the coin. We can look at it saying, oh my God, you're paying and how dare you to reviewers. But it's about respect. First of all, we would like to, for instance, if I know that the show that we're doing, and I respect very much, for instance, Tony Frankel or Stephen Lee Morris's opinion, because I know how educated they are in the field that we're pursuing. I trust that it will be covered objectively, which means for me, it's actually, as a director, it's a feedback that I need anyway. And yes, this objectivity and subjectivity of money and the exchange of money, financial transaction is something to be investigated. It could be a later portion of this conversation, but it is something that Russians do, yes.
More valuable than that, they feed the critics.
Yes.
Tell your Poland's.
Yeah.
Tell your
Yeah,
Poland's.
food is
It was
good.
actually Saratov, Russia. You go and you're invited into the artistic director's office where they have a buffet spread. All the critics are there, mingling with the artist and the director before the show. And it's expected. It's an insult if you don't eat the caviar and vodka that's all there. And then you go away and you go back. At intermission, you're expected to go back. And you continue, and then after the show, you continue more. So you can barely walk out of the theater, let alone write a review that's too nasty. That's the ethos. That's the ethos.
So we can